So let's start off by talking about representative game design. I'm going to make this as simple as possible. Does it look like soccer? Not just does it look like I'm going to pass from A to B, but is there decision making taking place in a game against another team or another player? So representative game design, it has to have the major elements of soccer. And for me, it's a game. It's keeping the ball. It's having a defender. It's having another team to play against. It looks like a regular soccer game, or at least elements of a soccer game. It can't be something that looks like, hey, we pass the ball from A to B to C, where there's no decisions being made and there's no goals and there's no nothing. So representative game design, there doesn't have to be goals. It could be a possession-oriented game where there's no goals, but it needs to look like soccer. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Next, let's talk about the importance of variability. So you can see even in this picture, in this rondo, you have a multiple-sided rondo grid. You have people all over the place in the middle and certain people on the outside positioned. Variability is something that you want to bring to every exercise. So you wouldn't do the same exact exercise every single day, because you want to keep placing these players in new environments that require new solutions, new thought processes, different touches on the ball. It's not always the same options. It's really important to develop players that are flexible players who can figure out how to win and be successful at all these exercises in any environment. So variability is a major thing that you have to consider when constructing exercises. Unstable training environments. It really is much the same as variability, but unstable training environments are players are always having to overcome things that they normally wouldn't have to overcome. This could be overloads, this could be you set up an exercise and you keep changing it. Maybe it could be a time constraint, maybe it could be constantly changing the rules, the touch restrictions, you name it, but an unstable training environment that's constantly changing up, so it's always causing players to adapt. When it comes to variability and unstable training environments, repetition without repetition, it's a very important thing to understand. If all you're going to do is the same thing over and over again, you practice just the same things. It's like a golfer who goes out with a bad swing and always just performs that same swing. But what if you give that golfer 3 clubs and tell him to, hey, now you have to play the whole golf course with just those 3 clubs. Now it's repetition, but it's repetition without repetition, because now they're hitting sand wedges from places they wouldn't hit sand wedges from, maybe a 7-iron from the tee. They're hitting their shots differently because they have to use the clubs differently. So my point is, when you have variability and you have unstable training environments, now the player's skills and the way they apply them and the way they make their decisions is constantly being forced to change because of the environment. So it is repetition without repetition. The next thing is that not every player needs the same thing. So if you constantly are giving them new training sessions, variability, you're constantly changing things, right? Every player then can start to pull from that environment what they personally need to get better. So the environment becomes the teacher and it provides the athlete with what they need. You don't structure a session necessarily around what one person you think needs or 2 people need. These sessions and these exercises should allow the players to develop whatever they personally need. Now, when you're creating these rondos, what can you do to create variability in unstable training environments and so forth? How can you make it game representative? Let's start with a couple examples. Change the shape, right? Change the shape of your rondos. Change the rules. 1 touch on the outside, 1 touch on the inside, free play on the inside. Whatever rules you want to change. Has to be 4 passes, 6 passes before you can transition. Change the number of players. Add some plus players, change the touch restrictions, change the service, right? Do we always have to kick a ball into people's feet? Can we throw balls into somebody's chest? Can we bounce it on the ground? Change the service. Add goals, add constraints, right? Maybe transition, you have to have one touch for transition if you're going to put it to the other grid. Whatever you want to do for constraints, it could be a time constraint. You could have them wear the vision, the peripheral vision restricting goggles if you want to make it a constraint where they have to scan more. Make it competitive, make it team, so if you give up the ball, you and your partner in the middle. Keep the fundamentals. When I say fundamentals, keep the game representative design, but you can change everything else so everybody keeps having to adapt and keep learning. Take a look at this. This is a 5v2, but look what we did. We made this 5v2 where you have to transition through the two gates on the outside. This is great, right? 5 versus 2, but now you have to switch on transition through one of the two gates. It went from a 5v2 rondo to a 5v2 transition through gates. This is what I call variability. This is what I call an unstable environment. And then, hey, we have to transition on one touch. You have to play the whole thing one touch, two touch on the steal, whatever it is, always adding that variability. But that was just an example of how to make a 5v2 into a 5v2 transition into a 5v2 transition through gates. Just another quick example of how you could change things up. So however you construct your rondos, try to keep in mind variability, unstable training environments, representative game design. And the last thing is that the exercise, you want it, the athlete, the player, so they can all get out of the exercise what they need. It's not for one player. The exercise provides for everybody.